Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Faith Baptist Church Sunday School. I'm Paul Welburn, and this is Valentine's weekend. It's nice outside today. It's Saturday before Sunday, before the 13th. So it's the 12th today, tomorrow's the 13th, and then, of course, Valentine's Day's Monday. But anyway, it is nice and warm today. It's going to be nearly 70 degrees here in North Carolina. And then Sunday, back to 30-degree highs and whatever. Snow, rain, something. So welcome to North Carolina. So we're going to be continuing several weeks. We'll have this Sunday, next Sunday, and then the following we are looking at Joseph, and we've been looking at his life from a 17-year-old in Canaan land, basically Israel. He was there with his father Jacob, who was named Israel, and then the 12 tribes, which were his brothers, which became the 12 tribes. He was sold into slavery, sold over to Egypt. He was a dreamer. He had dreams, and we're going to see this in this lesson today, that back when he was 17, he told his brothers, you guys are like the stars that are going to bow down, and I had this dream, and you're going to bow down to me one day. And the brothers were thinking, not only are you Dad's favorite, but now you're saying we are all going to bow down to you. We're much older, and we just need to get rid of this person. He is just somebody who's a problem. So he was cast into a pit, sold into slavery. The Ishmaelites took him to Egypt, sold him to Potiphar. He stayed with Potiphar. Potiphar's wife had an interest in him and said, this guy's really good looking. And Joseph said, nope. And so she trumped up charges on him. He was thrown into prison. He then, while he was in prison, interpreted dreams for the cupbearer and the baker that were Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. And he basically said, baker, you're going to die. Cupbearer, you're going to do well. He told them, he said, please remember me whenever you're let out of prison. And so anyway, the cupbearer and the baker were let out. The baker was hung. The cupbearer was raised up as far as he was promoted. And so the cupbearer forgot about Joseph. Joseph stayed in prison 2 more years. The whole time he stayed focused on what God wanted him to do. He was in a foreign country, but he remembered God's commandments and stuck to them, and basically stayed focused on what God's will was. So anyway, we're looking at, and you think about time frame wise, Joseph, this is prior to the Exodus, Moses, all this. This is way, way back. This is at the beginning of basically the nation of Israel, because his dad, his name was Israel. And so you had just some basic commands from God. He did not have scripture. He did not have commandments as far as what we know of God's commandments that were given to Moses. And so it was amazing that he stayed true, and he worshiped God, and he found favor wherever he was at. And that was a big thing. So let's look at Genesis chapter 41. We looked at 40 last week. He was in prison and forgotten about, stayed there 2 years. Now let's pick up, and you'll see, and I'll give an explanation of the scripture after I read it. It is just as I told Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming through the land of Egypt. After them, 7 years of famine will take place, and all the abundance of the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will devastate the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because of the famine that follows it. For the famine will be very severe. Since the dream was given twice to Pharaoh, it means that the matter has been determined by God, and he will carry it out soon. The person saying that is Joseph. So a lot had happened. 2 years. Pharaoh began to have these dreams, and he had them twice. And sometimes we may have dreams that are kind of similar, and you think, that's interesting, it's a pattern. But a lot of times we tend to have just those one-off weird dreams at night. In this case, it was a revelation to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was really bothered by it. He woke up the next day feeling weird, like you do sometimes after you have a dream. The next day, he woke up again feeling really weird, and he's thinking, okay. And so the cupbearer, dreams. You're having these dreams. I know somebody that can interpret these dreams. His name is Joseph, and he's in prison. I forgot. I was supposed to tell you about him. It's been 2 years. He's a great guy. I really think you should let him out. He can do wondrous things. So Pharaoh said, bring him here. Let's see if he can interpret these dreams. And they had struggled to figure out what this meant. Others, Pharaoh's people there, they're like, I don't know, these skinny cows devouring fat cows and things like that. Go back in scripture and look at these dreams that Pharaoh had. It was really interesting. And so Joseph said, okay, what this means, you're going to have 7 years of just a lot of good. There's going to be so much abundance that it's going to be hard to really keep track of it and store everything properly, because there's going to be so much. And then after that, there's going to be 7 years of famine. And the famine's going to be so bad, you're basically going to forget about the good things, the good old days. It's interesting. I refer to 2019 as the good old days a lot of times. I'll joke about it. Or if you hear about something and it's like, oh yeah, that was way back in 2017. Yeah, it seems like that was so far ago, especially right now. And things are starting to look up a little bit, but I know it's still challenging. And but I know it's hard to figure out time frames. I tend to combine 2020 and 2021 into 1 year. It's like, oh yeah, those are 2 separate years. Okay. But think about it. What if you knew back in 2013 that you should store up toilet paper and paper products and things like that, or that, buy a bunch of whatever, masks or something. I don't know. Just think about it. In 2013, if you knew what was going to happen in 2020, in spring of 2020, and what you could do to prepare for that, it would be interesting. I don't know. There's all kinds of things I'm sure that people could do that could help prepare. But God had revealed to Pharaoh at this time frame, in 7 years, you need to really make a plan and do well and get things set. And so, you think about, Joseph had been through a really good life up until 17. He had a great life there. He was favored with his dad. He could basically come and go and do things, sold into slavery. Then he found favor at Potiphar's house. It was good. He thought, okay, this is pretty comfortable. And then Potiphar's wife is back in prison. He finds favor in prison. He does well. The prison guard says, I'm going to put you in charge of all these people. Okay, this is good. I'm in prison, but at least I feel like I have some sort of freedom and people trust me. This is good. Interprets dreams, and then he's forgotten about. And he stays there another 2 years. Now he's back in front of Pharaoh. And age-wise, 25 maybe? 24? I don't know. Thinking about the time frame of years, he was 17 when he started out, so maybe a little bit younger than that. But he's there, and he knows that God is speaking through him. In fact, you can look and see at that last part where he said, the fact that you've had it twice like this means that God is saying something, and we need to listen to what God says. And so, Genesis 41, 47 through 49, during the 7 years of abundance, the land produced outstanding harvest. Joseph gathered all excess food in the land of Egypt during the 7 years and put it in the cities. In other words, he not only made sure that one of the main cities had it or whatever, Cairo, he made sure that all the different towns had their own supplies. He put the food in every city from the fields around it, so that Joseph stored up grain in such abundance, like the sand of the sea, that he stopped measuring it because it was beyond measure. What a great business plan. Again, if you knew in 2013, if you could set up a plan before spring of 2020, what would you do? And I'm sure people are like, all kinds of crazy thoughts, what. But really, though, from a realistic business standpoint, what would you do? Would you store up funds? Would you start to save money each month? Would you put away money? Would you, like I mentioned, paper products? Because I know early on paper products are kind of hard to find. Just what would you do? Or what if you knew now that there was going to be in 7 years a great drought? And so, again, food products. Joseph was given charge not only because he interpreted the dream, but he was, I'm sure, presented himself as somebody that was pretty level-headed. And Pharaoh said, since you've interpreted these dreams, develop a business plan and let's see what comes of it. And he did. What a genius plan to think about it, and how he provided basically for the whole nation of Egypt. And remember, he's not Egyptian. This whole time, he basically was a Hebrew slave. And so it was amazing what God had worked through somebody who was a whole different race to basically speak to the Egyptians. Let's look at Genesis 41, 50 through 54. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of famine arrived. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bore them to him. In other words, he married somebody that was Egyptian. And Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, God has made me forget all my hardship and my whole family. Wow. Basically, he said, I'm done with my family in Israel. But also, God has helped me forget the hardship, because now I'm in a place of trust, a place of power, and God has given me this position in life. And the second son he named Ephraim, and he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Then the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in every land, but the whole land of Egypt, there was food. And we'll continue to look at Joseph's life, because, you think about whenever you've had bad times and people have done you wrong. I mean, his family, his dad didn't, but his brothers had basically done him wrong. And you just kind of cut people off. You're like, I'm done with them. And then God elevates you, and you're in a place of, okay, I'm doing really well now. How's your attitude? And what was Joseph's attitude? I don't think he was being bitter, and we'll look at this again next week as far as bitterness and kind of how he handled that, and then further on. But it was interesting seeing how God worked through him, and how dreams were something that Joseph used in his life, and he allowed God to work through him. Great lesson. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Have a great week ahead. Happy Valentine's Day.